recently we saw the Dangote Refinery CEO, I'm talking about Dangote himself, praising the president for the reforms, something he hadn't done in the last, a few months because of the issues that he had with the leaders of the NNPC at the time. And some persons have also claimed that the reasons why the last administration of the NNPC were sacked was because of the issues that they had with Dangote. But recently, there was this, collaboration that has sparked some widespread discourse regarding how these two organizations are putting the pricing of petrol products. Well, we have with us to talk about this and even more an international expert when it comes to oil and gas. We're talking about Nick Agule. He is on Zoom this morning. Good to have you. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. All right. Are you excited about this new collaboration that Dangote has found with the new leadership of the NNPC, and how much of this collaboration would help stabilize the pricing on the oil and gas sector?
Thank you very much for that question. I am not excited about the collaboration because, in fact, if the regulators in Nigeria know what they are doing, they shouldn't sit and watch a collaboration like this. Why am I saying this? Dangote Refinery and the NNPCL, which is the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, are competitors. They are not collaborators, they are competitors. They are doing the same business. Yeah. Dangote has a refinery. He's refining petrol and putting it in the market. The NNPCL has got 4 refineries. They are expected to be refining petrol and putting it in the market. And then they are expected to fight each other in the marketplace. There needs to be a price war between the two of them to try and take the market. And it is only by having that price war that we as consumers can get the right prices, the fair pricing. Imagine that the news out there is that MTN and Airtel have gone into a collaboration so that they can supply telephone tonight. Is that going to be good news for us? It's not good news for us because we didn't know that instead of them to go into a price war, they are joining hands to fix prices for us. So to me, a lot of Nigerians may jump at this kind of news, more so because a lot of people think that the NNPCL is some sort of government agency that is regulating the petroleum industry, which is quite wrong. The NNPCL is a company operating in the petroleum sector, just like Dangote is operating, Shell is operating, Mobil is operating, Total is operating, Chevron is operating. It's a company. It has nothing to do with government regulation of the industry. So if one company is now in bed with another company, when both of them should be out in the market looking for our money and engaging in a price war, I won't say that I'm excited about that. And of course, the regulator of the downstream sector, which is the Nigeria Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and of course, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Council should call these two companies together and ask them what is the nature of this collaboration that you're talking about. Because if it is going to lead to price fixing, then you are committing a crime for which your managers will be charged to court. So this is what the least I expect of the regulators, to try and find out what this collaboration is all about.
Yeah, I mean, quite an interesting discourse, and the way you've put it. I remember in the last under Kerry, there was this consistent fighting. There was no week you wouldn't see a headline about Dangote going against the NNPC. But it's quite shocking that this new administration, it was so easy in terms of seamlessness, in terms of their collaboration. One would wonder. It does look like it seems that both of them would work against the interest of the common man. But to what extent, really? Because by and large, we know that NNPC has 20% stake in Dangote's refinery. Don't you think that that's the reason why this collaboration is happening?
First of all, I don't even think that the stake that the NNPCL has got in Dangote Refinery is up to 20% anymore, because sometime last year, either before the commencement of refining activities at the Dangote Refinery or before, there was a controversy that was raised by Dangote Refinery that the NNPCL did not pay for their share capital that they took in Dangote Refinery. And then I think Dangote announced, if I remember well, that it's now down to 13.5% or something. But whatever be the case, the fact is that the NNPCL holds shares in Dangote Refinery. But before I go forward, let me take on the carry era in the NNPCL when he was a group CEO. The fight that Mele Kyari led NNPCL that they had with Dangote Refinery was not a fight for the betterment of the consumer. It was not. It was a selfish fight by the NNPCL, who wanted to become a monopoly to supply Dangote Refinery's products. So that fight, in fact, the genesis of that fight was the fact that the NNPCL already had an arrangement where they were blending PMS in mortar. And then when Dangote Refinery was to come on stream, both the NNPCL and the regulator, for strange reasons, a regulator siding with another operator in the industry, were bad-mouthing Dangote Refinery, saying Dangote Refinery was not licensed, Dangote Refinery products were below standard and all of that. Just imagine that, because the thing in the oil industry is not as clear to Nigerians as other sectors. So just imagine that the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is the regulator of the banking industry, is siding with Zenith Bank against GT Bank. This is what was happening, as bad as that was. And unfortunately, the man who is the head of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority is still in his job as we speak today. But what happened clearly was, as I've said, Central Bank, regulator of the entire industry, siding with Zenith Bank to fight GT Bank. That is what was happening in the Mele Kyari era. And it was not for the good of the consumer. When the fight got to a point where the NNPCL now say, oh, we will be the sole supplier of Dangote Refinery's petroleum products in the Nigerian market. Again, it was terrible for somebody who have their own refinery, and yet they allowed their own refinery to die, and they were now struggling over the products of another refinery that they will be the only people to supply it. Until under pressure, they succumbed, and Dangote started supplying petroleum products through other marketers into the Nigerian market. So that was the kind of fight that was happening during the Mele Kyari era. It was an ignominious era. It was not for the good of the consumer. Mele Kyari came, found dead refineries, and left us with dead refineries. Even the ones he said he has refurbished, it has emerged that they are not working. So basically, what Mele Kyari did is nothing more than what the other man, what's his name, who was a minister for aviation, who went and painted an Ethiopian airline aircraft in Nigerian colors and came and did a fanfare to launch Air Nigeria, or is it Nigeria in Abuja, before he left office. That is what that Mele Kyari left with us. So all this fight was not for our good, and the collaboration that they are now having, the Dangote Refinery and NNPCL, is also not for our good. Let the NNPCL be a true competitor to Dangote Refinery, so that we can, as Nigerians, know that we are paying fair prices for petroleum products. And I can assure you that we are not paying fair prices, because if you look at the international crude oil market, between the time that Dangote Refinery started refining, I think they started refining in January of 2024. And I think by the time they started to refine PMS was about July, August of last year, 2024. Crude oil prices have gone as high as $91. And as we speak today, crude oil prices are $65. I just checked the market before I came online now. Now imagine that kind of fall in pricing. Yet Nigerians are still buying petrol close to the 1,000 naira mark. There has been no significant fall in the pump price of petrol, given that crude oil price have come down from $91 to do you know that it actually went below $60? Crude oil prices went below $60. And we are not seeing that at the pump. Why aren't we seeing it at the pump? There is no one else to compete with Dangote Refinery. It's the dominant supplier. There's no one else. Because if, for instance, NNPCL 4 refineries were up and running, 445,000 mega, 445,000 barrels were working, then the NNPCL will be pushing products in the market, Dangote Refinery will be pushing products in the market, and for them to sell, they will start cutting prices. If Dangote cuts their price, NNPCL will cut their price, or NNPCL will cut their price, Dangote will cut their price. And today, we should be buying petrol in the neighborhood of that kind of 500 to 600 naira. Yet, we are buying close to 1,000. So you can see that Dangote Refinery is just having a field day, making a lot of money. The only competition to Dangote Refinery today, as we speak, is if anybody, whether the NNPC or any major marketer, goes to import petroleum products. We just look at how much is the cost of importation.
So, by your analogy, this collaboration should not be happening. In fact, they should be competing, not collaborating in this sense. But one would wonder, is it not then about time that you feel that the NNPC should really sell the refineries, or maybe even lease it, so that we could have some sort of competition with Dangote refineries?
More than about time. More than. These are the kind of things that one had expected that President Tinubu was going to deal with immediately he took office. As President Tinubu took office in May 2023, the whole thinking was that because he's an oil industry man, and he has watched the performance of these refineries in the care of the NNPCA over time, for over 20 years and counting, that these refineries have not refined any barrels of crude oil, and yet they are paying billions to staff who have been there doing nothing, and that these refineries were actually sold in 2007 by the President Obasanjo regime, in the twilight of the President Obasanjo regime. Put all these things together should have made President Tinubu to realize that I can go back and sell these refineries. If investors put over $1 billion on these refineries, for in fact, 51% share of the refineries back in 2007, that I can go back and sell them. And if President Tinubu, in the first 6 months in office, had asked the Bureau for Public Enterprises to pick up the template that they used in selling the refineries in 2007, and brush up the template, update that template with current realities, and put the refineries in the market, we could have sold the refineries by now. And I can assure you that it would have taken, if we sold the refineries in 2023, by 2024, some of the refineries would have come back into operation already. And today we will have a real competitor in the market with Dangote Refinery. Otherwise, where we are now, Nigerians are just being roasted with high petroleum product prices.
So, by your analogy, it means that the pricing for the petroleum product is not fair to Nigerians. If the crude is sold to Dangote in Naira, I mean, we would see at least significant drop, in the pricing so far. Right now, people still buy fuel for as much as 920, 940, as the case may be. Do you think there are safety nets, especially for Nigerians, in terms of helping them wade off this collaboration that is coming between NNPC and Dangote? Do you think that the Nigerian populace, the Nigerian market, actually have, some sort of respite if this collaboration continues?
So first of all, the crude for Naira deal on its own will not crash petroleum products prices. Because like today now, Brent crude, which is the one that Nigerian crude is used to sell at, is $65. So if the NNPCL is to supply Brent crude, to supply crude, our crude is like avocados or Bonny Light and all that, but it's sold at Brent crude prices. So assuming the NNPCL were to supply crude oil to Dangote Refinery today, the crude oil will be priced at $65. The issue is the currency of payment, whether it is dollar or it's naira. So if it is crude for naira, then Dangote will have to pay naira, which is collecting from Nigerians at the pump. You will just pay the naira to the NNPCL and they take the crude. So you can see that whether the crude is sold in dollars or is sold in naira, on its own cannot crash crude oil, petroleum product prices, because Dangote is buying at $65 anyway. You understand? Except if the Nigerian government now says, okay, because the crude oil belongs to us and we are producing it at, say, $40. So let us now sell it to Dangote Refinery at $55 so that we can just make a $10 profit. That one is capable of them bringing the price of petroleum products down. But the crude for naira, a lot of Nigerians mistake it. The cost of the crude itself to Dangote Refinery is the same, whether it's paid in naira or it's paid in dollars. It is just the settlement. Okay, now that I have, it's like, let me put it in a very simple analogy for Nigerians to understand. You came out of your house, you wanted to go and buy bread. The bread is sold at $2. When you buy the bread, you and the seller of the bread, we agree in what currency should I pay you. If it is in naira, you just pay 2,000 naira and walk away. If it's in dollar, you pay the $2. To you, the cost of the bread is still $2, regardless of the currency that you use in settling. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So back to the point that you raised about the collaboration. These two companies are competitors. They are not collaborators. And the earlier the regulator of the industry, which is the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and the Federal Consumer Council, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Council, waiting to find out what is the basis for this your collaboration. What is it? Is it going to lead to Nigeria not getting fair pricing? That is the reason why they are there in their offices this morning, on a Monday morning. So what we expect the NNPCL to be doing is to go to their refineries and see how they are going to fix them. And if they cannot fix them, they should just raise the surrender flag, the white flag, and say, we have surrendered. So that President Tinubu can, at that point, decide what to do with the refineries. This is what we expect of the NNPCL, not going to Dangote Refinery and looking for a way to distribute Dangote Refineries petroleum products when their own refineries are down and they are paying staff and nothing is happening there.
I mean, you have really simplified this discussion, but one would wonder, we own this product. Why should we price it in dollars? Why don't we price it in our currency and sell to our own indigenous refineries so that the prices of these things will come down? I mean, look at what's going on in Libya, what's going on in other countries in the North Africa. The prices of the fuel there is far lower than what we have in Nigeria, including the population that we have against theirs. One will wonder, why don't we price this oil, this crude in our country, because it belongs to us?
Yes, so the point you have made is a very valid point. We own the crude, so why should we price it at market prices and then have petroleum products very expensive in the country where people are struggling to afford their rent? Workers this morning going to work, a lot of them are spending more than 50% of their earnings on transportation costs alone, before you talk about other costs like housing, food, and healthcare and every education. But I had on several occasions offered President Tinubu the option, because he is also the Minister for Petroleum, to say that why don't the Nigerian government enter into the same agreement that we entered with foreign refineries? Why don't we enter that same agreement with Dangote Refinery? whereby Nigerian government does not even need to sell crude oil to Dangote Refinery. We just supply to Dangote Refinery crude oil, 200,000 barrels, and tell Dangote Refinery that refine this crude oil for us and supply the products to us so that we can now sell them to Nigerians at cheaper rates. And yet, as a country, we'll be making money from the sale of the crude oil, and at the same time, Nigerians will be buying petrol far cheaper. We can enter an agreement like that. Why can't we enter an agreement like that? If we entered agreements like that with foreign refinery, why are we not entering it with Dangote Refinery? But question number two is that, does Nigeria have that crude oil to supply to Dangote Refinery? Do we have it? That's the question. Because all of the crude oil that is produced in Nigeria does not belong to Nigeria alone. Nigeria only has its own share from the crude oil, either from the joint venture or from the production sharing contract. Because the other operators, which is the international oil companies and the indigenous oil companies operating in the Nigerian oil sector, they also have their own share of crude oil. And the federal government cannot force their hands to supply their crude oil to Dangote Refinery, because some of them took loans to invest in the oil field on the promise that when crude oil is produced, they will use the crude oil to pay for the loans. So for a company that enters such an agreement, and there are many of them, because I operated in that industry for many years, they now produce the crude oil, and then the federal government hijacks the crude oil and says, give it to Dangote Refinery, instead of giving it to the person who gave you the loan to help you to produce the crude oil in the first place. This will just break the agreement and make Nigeria a no-go place for investors. So the real other issue that President Tinubu should be dealing with is that, why should the United States of America have 50 billion barrels of crude oil in reserve, and they are producing more than 10 million barrels per day, and Nigeria has 37 billion barrels reserve, and we're only producing less than 2 million? Just find a way to increase this production. When President Tinubu came into office in May 2023, if he had called a summit of all the stakeholders in the oil industry in Nigeria to say that, look, two things. Number one, I know that we produced 2.5 million barrels in Nigeria before. What can I do as your president for us to at least go back to that 2.5 million barrels, because the infrastructure to produce it is already there? That's number one. Number two, what will I do as your president to enable you push our production up to like 5 million barrels in the next 3 to 5 years? What should I do as your president? And by now, if production was ramping up to the 2.5 million barrels, we could probably in 2026, where we are now, be producing that 2 million or the 2.5 million barrels. And imagine if we increase production by 500,000 barrels, and we decided that we are going to give all of it to Dangote Refinery, so that later Dangote Refinery will be refining the products for Nigeria. Today we'll be buying products at much cheaper rates. So you see, there seems not to be movement on the side of government in terms of decision making and policy making in regards to this thing. This government will soon be 2 years in office. They might think they have all the time. They don't have all the time. When you have a program and you enter office, you execute your program. Look at Donald Trump. Agree with him or disagree with him, like him or hate him, you know that the man came into office with a program, and he set out to execute the program. So if President Tinubu came into office with an agenda for the oil industry, it should be on now. If he came with an agenda for the power sector, it should be on now. If he came with an agenda for domestic gas, it should be on now. If he came with an agenda for our steel plants, it should be on now. If he came with an agenda with railways, it should be on now. If he came with an agenda for agriculture, it should be on now. Same with an agenda for manufacturing, same with an agenda for tourism, and all of that. When you come with an agenda, within the first 6 months in office, you really begin the execution of that agenda. So that by the midterm, which is 2 years, you can now be telling Nigerians that, look at what I have done in 2 years. What is President Tinubu going to tell us at the half-year mark? because the issues that he inherited are still there. Insecurity is still there. Agriculture, as a result, is still there. They still plant. We are not saying everything should start working now, but we are saying, has the journey started? If we ask the question now, power sector, where is the journey that has started to add megawatts to the grid? Where is the journey? That is, I think that President Tinubu, I think he needs to sit up. That will be my conclusion on the matter.
Do you think that Nigeria is ripe for stopping completely importation of fuel from other countries? So many persons say that with the emergence of Dangote refinery, it will seem like our country will be a lot better, our currency will be a lot better. That hasn't really happened. But for you, do you think that with what we have with NNPC and Dangote right now, we are ripe for a total ban on importation of fuel?
I will say two things. Number one, if we ban importation of petroleum products, it will then make Dangote Refinery an absolute monopoly. In itself, there's no problem about that. In a lot of economies, you have monopolies. Like even here in the UK, where I'm speaking to you now, the people who bring power to the retailers, who then retail to us, are monopolies. The only thing that happens in a monopoly is that the government then takes very in-depth interest in the pricing of that monopoly. The government does not let the monopoly set prices on its own. Neither is the government setting prices for the monopoly. But what the government does is that the government goes into the books of that monopoly to look at the cost of the monopoly, and then look at the end pricing of the products to ensure that the monopoly is not making super profit. So long as the monopoly is not making super profit, the monopoly is recovering all of its costs with a fair profit applied on it, it's okay. So if we ban, then the NMDPRA, which is the regulator of the downstream sector, and the FCCPC, which is the consumer protection, must be in Dangote Refinery to look at Dangote Refinery's books. How much is it costing you to refine a liter of petrol? Will allow you profit margin of maybe 5%, 10% on it. This will be the pricing. That is what happens in a monopoly regime. On the other hand, if the government does not ban, then importation remains our only hope for competition in the industry. Since no other refinery in Nigeria has the scale of Dangote Refinery, if there is no ban, then importation will remain the only basis for why Dangote Refinery may fear competition and reduce prices for us. So it's left for the government to decide on what they want to do. But for me, the real solution will be, whilst we are discussing this, our 4 refineries should be going to the private sector to operate.
All right. There's this refinery that we're hearing that might come up sometime soon, somewhere in Akwa Ibom. I think BUA is looking to establish its own refinery pretty soon. But I'm wondering if you think that Nigeria needs more refineries right now in order to be able to even beat the price down. Do you think competition would do that, and to what extent? This collaboration that NNPC and Dangote is doing, do you think that it would also extend that to this refinery if it comes on board? What are Nigerians really gaining from this whole collaborations? Because it does seem that Nigerians are not gaining anything significant, because when this Dangote refinery came on board, we were thinking that prices are going to come down, over time. But this is around more than a year or so, and up until this moment, it doesn't look like these prices are actually going to come down. What are the importance or the advantages of having more refineries? And do you also think that modular refineries should also come on stream? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages?
First of all, NNPCL's 445,000 barrels per day capacity refineries alone is enough for the Nigerian market. Is the Nigerian market, I don't think the Nigerian market demands more than what that kind of output is. So the Dangote Refinery, 650,000 barrels capacity is already over and above the demand in the Nigerian market. And that is why Dangote is exporting some of its products. So the question is that does Nigeria need more refineries now? The answer is yes. We can have more refineries, but not for the Nigerian market. Because the Nigerian market, as we stand now, the capacity that we have in country, which is coming from the 650,000 barrels Dangote refinery is already enough. And like you say, the Boa refinery is also on. The construction work is on, could be coming on stream this year or next year. I'm not sure about the facts about that. But the thing is that Singapore does not produce a barrel of crude oil. Not one barrel of crude oil does Singapore produces, not one. And yet, Singapore's refining capacity is about 1.5 million barrels per day. 1.5 million barrels per day. That means if you add Dangote Refinery to the NNPCL refinery to the Boa refinery, you have still not yet got to Singapore's refining capacity. So, and the Singaporean market, given the small size of Singapore, is not the one consuming all of those products. Instead, Singapore is refining petroleum products and selling it to even the likes of Nigeria, which is an oil producer. So if we want to have more refineries, it's a welcome idea. So that if at the end, Nigeria does not even export any crude oil again, we don't export any crude oil again. All the crude oil that we produce, we put them through the refineries that are in Nigeria, and we refine them, and then we sell them to consumers abroad. It is better for our economy because you see, we're adding value to the crude oil. The refineries are in Nigeria, they are going to create jobs, and they pay taxes, and it will make our economy to be better. So that what we are now selling to consumers outside the country are refined products. So these are the kind of areas that you expect government to be looking at to say, look, how are we going to create an enabling environment? What can we do to attract investors to come and set up more refineries in Nigeria so that we will just be refining all of our crude oil before we export?
Interesting. How do you think the international community is reacting to Dangote's refinery? I mean, they have made a lot of monies from Nigeria's, over the years importing fuel from them. How do you think they are adjusting, to what we already have right now? And do you think that they would have other plans going forward?
Yes, so they made a lot of money from us, truly, because for a long time, 20 years or more, Nigeria as a major oil producer was not refining. So our crude oil was going abroad. They were refining for us and sending it back to us. Now that Dangote Refinery has come, let me also add a caveat that even now that Dangote Refinery has come, importation of petroleum products is still happening in Nigeria. NNPCL is still importing petroleum products. It's just that it's no longer importing it at the volume that they were doing before Dangote Refinery started. And the people that we were buying petroleum products from, they will have a loss in market share. Our market, they will have a loss. But it's not an issue because, you see, as we speak today, the world is still demanding more petroleum products than are being produced. So there will always be market elsewhere. That's why Dangote Refinery himself has reported selling petroleum products to the likes of Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia, to the United States, to Europe, and all of that, and then even to Africa. So it's a free world. Oil moves across boundaries. The thing with the oil, crude oil, is that if you look at an economy like the US is producing maybe 13 million barrels per day. They are producing more than 10 million barrels, what Nigeria is producing. Yet the US is importing crude oil. Yet the US is exporting crude oil. So that is the way it works. The US has a huge refining capacity, Their refining capacity is above 10 million barrels per day as well. Yet the US is still importing petroleum products. Yet the US is still exporting petroleum products. So when it comes to petroleum, it's not a hard and fast rule to say that, oh, if you have a Dangote refinery, then everything must be consumed from Dangote refinery and all that. No, Dangote refinery can export, can supply the Nigerian market. Nigeria can export crude oil, can import crude oil, and that's the way it works. Petrol moves, crude oil and petroleum products. They move in line with the ownership. They don't move in line with national boundaries. So that's the way it happens.
Have we completely harnessed the importance or the advantages that comes with modular refineries? If we haven't, how can we do that? Because I was thinking that that could have been the way to go in order to be quick in putting competition at the front burner.
So the advantage with modular refineries is that you don't have to have a full refinery built before you start refining petroleum products. Because if you see that Dangote refinery that is there now, that refinery itself is in modules. There is a module for PMS. There's a module for AGO, which is a diesel. There's a module for aviation fuel. There's a module for LPG, which is what we call cooking gas. There's a module for other products like asphalt and all of that, and petrochemicals that come off a refinery. So a modular refinery is meant to be an easy to construct refinery. Usually it's already like constructed already, and then you just bring it and then install it for one module. So you can just install the module for diesel production only, and then you take in crude oil and refined diesel and all of that. It's meant to expand refining such that you don't have to have money like Dangote's $20 billion before you can operate a refinery. You can have less than that, even less than $1 billion, and you set up a modular refinery to now produce. The question is that a lot of people have got licenses in Nigeria to set up modular refineries. A few of them are up and running, but the majority of those licenses are live west, which is another area that the government needs to look into. President Tinubu is a minister for petroleum. For me, I think he's too busy to be looking into some of these things. If he releases a portfolio to a full minister, the minister will look into modular refinery and say, how many people have got licenses? And how many people have even started the design work for the refinery? Not talk about construction. And you have not started anything. We will take the refinery, the license from you and award it to people who have the capacity to do it. That is how you manage an economy. People go to office, they need to be working. You need to be dealing with the matters that are on your table. We can't just let this economy to be running on a free fall as it is now.
Petroleum pricing over the years have been a tool, especially political tool, in order for politicians in power to sway votes, to some extent. Do you see that playing out in this particular administration as we head on to the 2027 general elections? Because a whole lot of persons also feel that the pricing by the Dangote and NNPC is actually very, very high. And so do you see a situation where the current administration would decide to bring down the pump price just as we head on to 2027 election in order to sway votes?
The pricing is very high. I can assure you that the pricing is very high. We are buying petroleum products at Platts, which is the international price at which petroleum products are sold. But Nigerians are not earning at international levels. Like my daughter, who is a primary school teacher, she just left home to go to work. She's earning 3,000 pounds, 3,000 pounds a month. If you convert that to Nigerian money, it's over 6 million. Imagine a primary school teacher earning 6 million naira a month. Yeah, but she's paying petroleum products at Platts in the UK, and a Nigerian worker who is on 70,000 naira is also forced to pay for petroleum products at Platts. It's too expensive, because like the cost per liter of petrol here in the UK now is 1.3, So, but even just say, let's just for analysis sake, we say it's even £2. If it is £2, my daughter will be able to buy 1,500 liters of petrol at £2 with her salary. But now, let's say petrol in Nigeria is 1,000 naira. Somebody who is on minimum wage of 70,000 naira can only buy 70 liters. So the man in Nigeria can only buy 70 liters of petrol. My daughter can buy 1,500 liters of petrol. Can you see the difference in terms of what we're talking about? So the price is rather too high. And the things that the government will not do to bring the prices down, the government is not doing it, which is basically our refinery, number one, basically looking at things like power supply. Because, you know, it is a lot of the petroleum products are going into generating sets to generate power. And if power supply was improving, then the demand for petroleum products for generating sets will fall. And, you know, the lower the demand, the lower the price for products. And then the government should be looking at mass transportation. Mass transportation, my daughter that I'm talking about now, she didn't carry a car to work. She just walk to the bus station, she take a bus. So that bus is mass transportation. There are trains, mass transportation. So if you look at all of that traffic coming into Lagos, coming into Abuja, people are sitting alone in their car, driving to work and burning petroleum products. Whereas if 10,000 of them were on one train, they will all be paying for the same petroleum product that the train is using. And by the way, as we speak here today, trains are using electricity. And that electricity is coming from renewable energy, which is solar or wind or hydro. You know, so if that be the case, then we will not be depending on these petroleum products that much again. So there's still a lot of work for the government to do to make
Nick,
to make
many
things
thanks.
better
We
for
truly,
Nigeria.
really appreciate you for breaking it down for us the way and manner you've done this morning. Many thanks for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.